Drop the tea out of your pot.
Yeah, I would do that. I'm a big tea dropper.
Better a tea dropper than an egg dropper.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. Yeah.
My older daughter is very good friends with Pesha.
Okay, she that was in my show, Pesha.
Oh, yeah.
My niece, yeah. My niece. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Welcome everybody. Hope everyone's having a warm winter. At least in Yerushalayim. Before I begin, as you see from the sheet, the Shiur today is Lecher Nishmas, my brother-in-law, Rafal Dov Marcus, whose yahrzeit is Motzei Shabbos Sunday, and my father-in-law, Rabbi Shiur Zeibimov, whose yahrzeit is next Tuesday night. Actually, my father-in-law was the Rav. Rafal Marcus was the Rav of my father-in-law. My father-in-law davened in the shul. They were very good friends, and they both held each other in high esteem. So the Shiur today is dedicated in their memory. I'd like to talk about today the role of Yehudis in the miracle of Hanukkah. Now, we're growing up and we hear the whole story of Hanukkah. We hear about Matisyo, his 5 sons, Chana v'Sheva Baneha, where it's and then of course the story of Yehudis, which I will mention. However, and the question is, what else is there to say? So I saw in the Sefer by Rabbi ben Ber Chayim, he asked the question that the Gemara Masechah Shabbos and Daf Chaf Aleph starts off with the halachas of what candles, what oils and wicks you can use for the Hanukkah menorah. And then it talks about what the mitzvah lighting the Hanukkah candle is, what you have to do. And then the Gemara says, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah? So it's kind of out of place. In other words, the Gemara should have started off and said, my Hanukkah. And then the Gemara should have went through all the halachas. Okay? So obviously the reason is because, as the Gemara usually does, it was speaking about wicks and oils for Shabbos. So it spoke about wicks and oils for Hanukkah also. But still, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah, should have been, at that point, why does it come after almost all halachas are discussed? And he says something very cute. He says, because no matter how many years, you can learn all about Hanukkah, and you can keep Hanukkah many years, and you can still ask, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah? Because there's always something new to learn about Hanukkah. So even though the role of Yehudis in the miracle of Hanukkah is something which, we've all heard about. There's always something to learn about whether really Yehudis really did have a role in the miracle of Hanukkah. So, I'd like to begin with the Gemara Masechah Shabbos Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. And the Gemara there is discussing who has an obligation to light the Chanukah menorah. And the Gemara says in Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, the Isha Vade Madlika, that even though in general a lady is not obligated in mitzvot, commandments that are time-oriented, mitzvah say shazman grama, when it comes to the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, of lighting a Chanukah menorah, so for that, a lady definitely is obligated in that mitzvah. Because as Rabbi Shiur ben Levi says, women are obligated in their Chanukah, she'af ein hoyu b'osanes. Because since they were also in some way involved in that miracle, they are also obligated in the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. So all the Rishonim, the commentators ask, how are they involved in the mitzvah, in the miracle of Hanukkah? Because, if we think about the miracle of Hanukkah, so there are two miracles. There was the miracle of fighting the war, and in general we assume that who used to fight, it was really the men. And number two, there was the miracle of the menorah. And the menorah, we know the miracle happened in the temple with Kohanim, male Kohanim. So Rashi says, if you look at Rashi and very carefully, it's important to see Rashi's words on source number 2, and then we'll look at other opinions. Rashi says, Shegazru Yavanim, the Greeks decreed, Al Kol Besulos, that all virgins who are getting married for the first time, Liboil Etavser Tchila, they have to spend the night with a Greek officer first. And that was obviously very traumatic. It was tragic. And as we'll see, it seems that a lot of the girls refused to get married, or at least would not reveal they were getting married. The Al Yedei Isha Nasa Nes. And a miracle happened because of a certain woman. So Rashi does not say that a miracle of Hanukkah happened because of a certain woman, as we understand, some understand of the Gemara. Rashi says, in terms of this tragedy, in terms of this challenge, a miracle happened through a lady, and because of that, in order to mark this miracle, women, as an exception to the rule where ladies usually are not obligated in the mitzvah, time-oriented mitzvah, however, this mitzvah they are obligated to not only remind ourselves of the greater miracle that happened in the big war, but even in this battle in terms of this decree. That's what Rashi says. So it seems that Rashi is very simple. However, if you look at source number 3 is a little more complicated. So when it comes to time-oriented mitzvot, that we said that women are usually not obligated in, there are exceptions. And one of those exceptions is the mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candle, and there are 2 more exceptions. The other exception, this is mentioned the exceptions are mentioned in Masechah Shabbat in regard to Hanukkah. It's mentioned in Maseches Megillah in regard to Purim, and it's mentioned in Maseches Pesachim in regard to drinking the 4 cups of wine on the Seder night. So ladies are obligated in the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah and all the mitzvot of Purim for the same reason, because they were involved in the miracle. And ladies are also obligated in the mitzvah of drinking arba kostos, 4 cups of wine Pesach night, even though it's a time-oriented mitzvah, because as the Gemara says, the Talmud says, it was they were involved in the nes. So if you look at Tosfot, source number 3, Maseches Pesachim, Tosfot says, doesn't say they caused the miracle to happen. Tosfot says, Perish Rashbam, the Rashbam explains, Shal Yodam Nigalu, that the Jewish people, they were redeemed, they were saved because of ladies. Not that a miracle happened because of them, but the miracle happened. So he says, so the question is, how did a miracle happen because of them? So when they left Mitzrayim, it happened because of the ladies. That we'll see in a few minutes. V'chein b'Megillah, al yedei Esther. So Purim is a no-brainer. Esther caused the miracle. She orchestrated everything in the castle, and she told Mordechai what to do. And maybe later on Yud Gimel Adar, so later on that year, most of the men were involved, but Esther certainly organized the miracle. And then it says, "V'Chanukah al yedei Yehudis," And the miracle of Hanukkah happened through Yehudis. Okay, we'll explain the miracle of Yehudis in a second. So what really happened with Yehudis? Okay, so first of all, you have to understand that Sefer Yehudis, there's a Sefer called Yehudis. It's one of the Sfarim Chitzonim, one of the books that did not make it into the Tanakh, was not codified, and it's a story about a certain that there was a decree. And by the way, this book, it's very unclear when it happened. It could be it happened during the time of the Persian Empire. It could be maybe it happened before. Maybe it happened later. It's very unclear. One thing for sure, it certainly did not happen. That's what the historians say. First of all, question if it did happen, but if it did happen, it certainly did not happen around the time of the Hanukkah miracle. That's for sure. He says, so what happened? They made a decree that actually the story is quoted by the Shiltis, Rabbi Chayim, but they made a decree that during the time, they made a decree that any girl that gets married has to spend the night with the Roman, let's say the Greek general, the Greek general. So what happened? Because of that, and also you can't have Brit Milah. So because of that, whenever a Jew had a simcha, they wouldn't publicize. It's done in quiet. And we know that we as Jewish people, we like to publicize simchot. It's very important. But the bris milah was done in hiding. The weddings were done in hiding in order to avoid this confrontation with a Greek general. However, Gemara says, the Shiltis, one of the Gaonim, so he says that at one point that one of the daughters of the Chashmonaim, okay, and therefore it's actually fascinating. It doesn't say Matisyo. One of the daughters of the Chashmonaim, all right, was supposed to get married, and they weren't able to hide that fact. It doesn't say it wasn't say it was one of it could be so therefore it could be it happened even after the Hanukkah miracle because that's the one of the daughters of Chashmonaim, and therefore the Melech, the king, heard about it. And the king said, I want the daughter, right? So he says, to come to spend the night with me, right? So what did the daughter do? The daughter's sitting there thinking, if I go ahead and I allow this to happen, all other Jews would go ahead, Jewish girls, and follow my example. And therefore, I am not, he says, I am going to give myself over to be killed. All right, so what did she do? So he says, she went ahead and she put on rags, okay? And she would go ahead and give wine out to people, and everyone was embarrassed of her. So she says, you're embarrassed of me? Tzadikim, b'nei tzadikim, chasidim, b'nei chasidim? Why embarrassed of me? Because I'm wearing rags? Aren't you embarrassed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God, that we're allowing something to happen? It's very important. So at that point, okay, the Yehuda and his brothers decided to come up with certain ideas, and what they did was they sort of made a fancy reception for the king. So the king, thought that they were playing the game with him, and he was very happy. And then he says, and so what happened. So so what happened was the king was very happy. And he says he basically decided to spend time alone with Yehuda. So when he was alone with Yehuda, at that point he decided that he'll be alone. He trusts Yehuda, and when he was alone with Yehuda, it says Yehuda took out a sword and basically cut off his head. It says no, Yehuda. According to what the Shiltis quotes, different. There are many different Gersos in the story. That's according to the Shilt. That's according to what the Shiltis says. This was the general. So when the king heard this story, so he was very upset, and he came. So what happens at that point? Yehudis. So there was a woman in Yerushalayim whose her name was Yehudis. And then the whole story goes that she said to the king, and the king said, I want to marry you. And she said, I'm not really worthy to be married to you. And the whole story, and this is the whole story. Basically, she chopped off his head. Okay, so the Shilkus does quote the story. Okay, no question about it. The story is quoted. However, as I said, we don't know what happened in the history. If we don't know really when it happened. But that's one question. It's number one. But that's what the Rashbam says, that b'Chanukah al yedei Yehudis. But we know that was not the main miracle. Okay? And we're comparing the Nes of Purim, the miracle of Purim, to the miracle of Chanukah. And we're saying that just like the Jews were saved by Esther Purim time, they were saved by Yehudis Chanukah time. But how can we compare the two miracles? That's question number one. In other words, obviously Yehudis played a hand, but the main miracle did not happen through Yehudis. That would be question number one. Question number two. Yeah. It talks about first. It does say when they're victorious over their enemies. It does mention that, and they came to the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, but the fact is, the Gemara does not say a word about Yehudis either. It's not mentioned in the Gemara. Okay, it's not mentioned in the Gemara. So when we speak about the miracle of Chanukah, how can we compare the miracle of Chanukah to the miracle of Purim? That's question number one. Question number two is actually Tosfos' question. Tosfos says, "Af hein hoivos hanes." What does that imply? It doesn't imply they were the major cause of the miracle. That implies that they were part of the miracle. They were also involved in the miracle. But if you're going to tell me it means that they caused the miracle like Esther, and as the Rashbam says, that through Yehudis, how can you say, you should say, Hein asu et hanes, not af ein, but Hein asu et hanes. They did the miracle. So that's question number two. Question number three, we have to understand, how does Pesach fit into this? So what happened Pesach time? So you look at source number 4, Yehudis caused the miracle. Esther caused the miracle. What happened Pesach times? The Rishonim say, source number 4, Mitzrayim, because of the righteous woman in that generation, the Jews were redeemed from Mitzrayim. What happened? Because he says, when they would go to draw water to drink, so the HaKadosh Baruch Hu would cause fish to come in the well, all right? And they would go ahead and take out water and take out fish. And then they would go ahead and they would make hot water and they would make fish for the husbands. And then they would bring it to the field and they would go ahead and wash their husbands and give them to drink. And then there would be intimacy. And because of that, the Jewish families were able to reproduce and to continue growing. So that's how how does that compare to Esther and Yehudis? There are no miracles there. What happened here? Yehudis caused the salvation. Esther caused the salvation. What was the salvation here? So what is the comparison? What is the comparison to Chag HaPesach? Okay, now, then, one more question about Yehudis is, did it really happen? Okay? So, I actually thought as I was going through this that, I was saying, something startling. But if you look at source number 6, you'll see that many people have said this, that the whole miracle of Yehudis did not happen Chanukah time. All right? Now, what is this based on? So there is a halacha that it's brought down, mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, and that's actually in source number 11, the beginning of Hilchas Chanukah, that there's a custom, even though Chanukah were allowed to do malach, allowed to do work, there's a custom that on Chanukah, women do not light candles, do not do malacha, work while the candles are lit. What is it based on? So people say it's based on the fact, because since the miracle happened through Yehudis, so therefore, to mark that miracle, women abstain from doing malacha while the candles are lit. Now, if you look at source number 6, that's the Moruksiyah. He says the Moruksiyah, number 6. He says that's Rav Yaakov Emden. He says Behuzal Hosif Lomar Shenes Chanukah was done through women, and then he says V'zed Davar Badui, and this is a mistake. It's a mistake. He says Kibi Emet Ain't Shaychud Klal L'Nosh Nes Chanukah Yoshmar Noshim. There's no, against Tosfos, the women do not have more of a hand than the men in the miracle of Chanukah. They're the same. Lo Amru Azal, and the Chazal said, Sha'af Hein Hoibos Hanes, like Tosfos says. The Chazal do not say they did the miracle, they were also involved in the miracle. Sha'yivanim Gozra L'Isha Hanise Shibalek Menchila. Because the Greeks went ahead and they made a gzeira on the Jews that they should have relations before they get married with a general. All right? It's not that they went ahead and he says, and what it means is that their decree included the women. Lo shehein heina or the siman garm l'nes. And he says, as is known, you look at the book of the Chashmonoim, you look at the book of Josephus, no one mentions that they caused some sort of miracle. And even though in the Piyut of Hanukkah, with those who say Piyutim, they mention a miracle that happened, so he says maybe it happened because of Sefer Yehudis, but if you look, B'rachokim ma'od bizmaneihem zemizeh. In terms of time, they were so far distant apart. In terms of years, you can't connect the miracle of Hanukkah to the miracle of Yehudis. V'lo karav zeh zeh. So Rabbi Yaakov says, so why all of a sudden do we go ahead and say women shouldn't light candles, do malacha because of Yehudis? So he says something startling. Im lo shenemar sherotza lotet zikaron gam Yehudis. We want to remember the miracle of Yehudis, and therefore, since they couldn't find any other time to remember it, when do you do it? So he says, because he says that it happened in the time of the first exile. He says, therefore, they connected it to Nes Chanukah. That's what he says. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden says it didn't happen in all the time of Hanukkah. It happened around the time of the Babylonian exile. And he says, so we have to understand, so why would we connect it? Why would we go ahead and connect it to the miracle of Hanukkah if it didn't happen then? If we look further at source number 11, source number 10, 9, 10, and 12. So first of all, the Aruch HaShulchan also in source number 12 mentions in source number 12, he also mentions let me just find my sheet. He also mentions the idea they don't do malacha because the nes of Yehudis. All right, he says, and he points out, he says, "Va'od b'meshach hazman." What meshach hazman mean? It happens some other time. It happens some other time. For that reason, so if it happens some other time, how do we connect that to Hanukkah? Okay, that's another question. And then there is also a custom to eat milchaka food on Hanukkah. Why? Because the story of Yehudis. Because how did Yehudis get the general to be? What happened when the general was good and drunk and sleeping? That drunk, she cut off his head, right? And she was able to come back and show the head of Yehudis and say, of the general and say, "Look, I killed the general," and they were able to win the battle. The Jews. So how did she get him drunk? She gave him a lot of milk products to eat, cheese. Wine and cheese party, right? So if you look at the Ben Ish Chai, the Ben Ish Chai says in source number 10, even the Ben Ish Chai, he says, "Ochlim machol echala b'chana gazech l'neis, shenasu b'chola b'shechil Yehudis is oye, shoye malchi yavim." And he says, "V'amaisu hua b'sefer chemdas yavim." This story of Yehudis is brought in Sefer Chemdas Yavim. V'nei zeh nase kodam neiso ikari. This miracle happened before them more than Kamashanim. Ach, hoil va'osa oyev hoyim malchei yavan. Since this enemy was from the malchei yavan, gam hu yirotzel das, and this king also wanted the Jews to violate the Torah. Lakach osan nezeh. We also make a miracle, a zecher to this, b'mei Chanukah. And he says, but how can you do that? It's very simple. He says, there's a minhag to eat poppy seeds on Purim. Okay, I don't eat poppy seeds on Purim because I happen not to like poppy seeds. Okay, but I remember everyone used to always buy hamantashen with poppy seeds in it. What's the basis of that? Very simple, because since Daniel in the palace and his friends couldn't eat the food in the palace, they would eat fruits and vegetables, and they ate poppy seeds, and they survived, and they were strong. So the zecher to that miracle to eat poppy seeds on Purim. Okay, what does Daniel have to do with Purim? It happened around the same time, so that's why. So he says, just like we commemorate what happened to Daniel Purim time, we commemorate what happened to Yehudis on Chanukah time. And then he adds another reason. He says, and therefore is the minhag to eat milchiks, and also because Chalav stands for Chodesh, and then you have the Chodesh, Shabbos, and Milah. So you have the Lamed stands for Milah, and the Beis stands for Shabbos, and the Ches stands for Chodesh, because they wanted to stop Milchos Chodesh. But again, we seem to be tying Yehudis into the whole story of Hanukkah, and really it didn't happen Hanukkah time. So that's another question. Now, I want to ask one more question, and then sort of sum up this part of the shiur, and then come to another question at the end. And one more question is like this. So, we know women are mechuyavos in the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. Okay? And the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is a very unique mitzvah, because basically there are many ways to Mekayim the mitzvah. Today, Baruch Hashem, we live at a time when, in general, Jews are can afford to Mekayim mitzvah Chanukah in the best way. But the Gemara says, if you want to be Mekayim mitzvah Chanukah, every house lights one candle. If you want to do the mitzvah in a better form, then you should go ahead and light a candle for each person in the house. And if you want to do it mahadrin min mahadrin, so then you should do it. Well, it's a machlokes, the Sfardim Ashkenazim. According to Tosfos and the Sfardim, you should light one candle for each night in the house. And according to the Rambam and Ashkenazim, you should light one candle for each night and for each person. So that means there's 6 people in the house. On the 6th night of Hanukkah, you would light 36 candles. Okay? And our minhag is basically that Ashkenazi minhag, is that every person lights their own menorah. Okay? And really the truth, the way the minhag should be done, is that all the men and all the ladies should light their own menorah. Right? And in my house, where I grew up, and in many houses, the husband would light, and the boys would light, and the girls would light. Okay, my uncle felt that even the women should light because women are mechuyeves mitzvah ner Chanukah, and that's what is mash from the Rambam. However, the Mishnah Berurah mentions Shitas and Meiri, and that's what my father did. That the lady does not light; she is yotzi of her husband's menorah, unless, of course, the husband is not home. Then she would light. And as a matter of fact, so the Mishnah Berurah asks why. After all, women are mechuyavos. So just like, for example, on Pesach night, I'm not going to drink 8 kosos for my wife. I have to drink 4 kosos, and she has to drink 4 cups. So why, when it comes to Ner Chanukah, I can light for her? Mishnah Berurah says Ish took a gufo, that a husband and his wife are like one unit. So if I light the menorah, it's like she's lighting the menorah. That is, as long as we're in the same house. Obviously, if I'm away or she's away, we have to light by ourselves and where we are. And it's fascinating, because where else do we see such a concept? Each took a gufo, that I can go ahead and I can do a mitzvah for my wife because we're one unit. So it comes up in regard to, I think, Hilchas Yerusha, inheritance laws. It comes up in regard to maybe Hataras Nadarim, that I can be Mater Neder for my wife. And it also comes up in terms of benching gomel. Halacha is that if, let's say, for example, someone's wife was in a dangerous situation and she came out, Baruch Hashem, alive, her husband can bench gomel for her because it's chavav alav kegufo, we hope. Okay, that's the, but he says, where else do you see such a thing? Ishto kegufo, she doesn't do the mitzvah. Where do you see such a concept? If you look, it's actually mentioned in the source sheets. So it's source number 16. The Shulchan Aruch says, "V'yesh omrim dechol echad ve'abayis yadlik," that everyone in the house has light a candle. And number 17, "V'yesh omrim dechol echad levad mi'ishto," besides your wife. Why? The hikagufo, because she is like your guf. So, why does that happen? So once you're going to tell me that you're lighting for every member of the household, so how come the women don't light? The ladies don't light? Again, I said, certainly a lady could light, and the custom is in many families that the ladies do light now. Many families, they don't light. And it was interesting, that I remember the first time I heard about this, sometimes you grow up in a certain house, you think everyone does it this way. So I remember I was riding in New York City many years ago, and I was listening to a radio station, a Jewish radio station, and there was a Rav giving a shiur, and he was asking the question, why is it that young girls don't like the menorah? It was a chiddush to me. I thought, of course, young girls like the menorah. At my house, I haven't lit the menorah. And he goes on, he says, well, the reason is because, this is a chasam sofer, because since when they get older, they're not going to light because their husband lights for them. They don't light when they're younger either. To me, it sounded very, very strange, but that is definitely the custom here in Eretz Yisrael in many, many houses. But it seems it's more correct that everyone should light, according to the Mishnah Berurah at least. Mishnah Berurah says that only the wife doesn't light because of Ishto Kagufo. The question is why? Why shouldn't she light by herself? Why do we say here the lady is Yotze of her husband? Let her light her own menorah. Okay, that's another question. So, in order to understand this, what I want to see and take notice of is other stories that happened. So if you look at source number 15, okay, so source number 15 is Megillas Tainus. And Megillas Tainus was actually written by Chazal. So therefore, Megillas Tainus is very, very authentic. And let's see how they describe what happened with what they describe what happened with a story similar to Yehudis. So Megillas Tainus is a sefer that lists all the holidays the Jews celebrated during the time of the Second Temple era, because of miracles that happened. In general, many days they didn't say Tachanun. It says, in general, we don't commemorate any of these holidays today because those holidays were beneficial to the Second Commonwealth, and once we're not living anymore and we don't have the Second Mikdash, those holidays don't benefit us. The only two notable exceptions that we keep are Hanukkah and Purim, and one of the big questions is also Tu B'Av. It's also a question that's been discussed. How come the 15th day of Av? But we're not going to get into that. So he says, Gemara says, so what happened? And Shiva Asur B'Alal. And I'm going to read this inside just because it's important to see, source number 15, what exactly happened. B'Shiv Sarbei, Nafgui Romoim Yerushalayim. On the 17th, the Romans left Yerushalayim. So we're talking about the Romans. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. So he says, Mivnei Shahayu Mitzar Levnei Yerushalayim, V'lo Yochel Lotzot Nehem B'Yom El V'Layla. Okay? So he says, and you couldn't go out in daytime, only at nighttime. And then it says, and also the Malchi Yavan went ahead and harassed the Jews. He says they would put officers in every city to harass and probably, I would say, called molest brides. And afterwards they would marry their husbands. Okay, and because of that, nobody would have a wedding because they were afraid to make a big party. People would hear about that, and that was the curse that the pasuk says: each tahares, one woman will get engaged, and someone else will lay with her, and no one wanted to marry because of these officers. All right, and therefore, what did they do? They went ahead and they got married in quiet and secret. And then if you look towards the end, it says like this. Ubas achas hoyelatisyo b'sham kohen gadol. All right, he says, and one daughter was to Matisyo, v'kishagia zman alinose, and when it came time for her to get married, ba hakastron latama. The officer came to mitame her. This is a story mentioned from the Shiltis. V'lo hinichu so he didn't let v'kanu Matisyo bana v'gavri yadam amalchus yavan, and the Matisyo and his sons were very jealous, and because of that, he says they went ahead and they were victorious over the Greeks. So in other words, Matishyahu and his sons, before the miracle of Hanukkah happened, they stopped this from happening. So in other words, again, what's authentic in Chazal, a story very similar to Yehudis, the miracle did not happen through Yehudis, it happened through Matishyahu, as the Shiltas mentions. So why are we speaking about Yehudis? Okay, now, if you go and you look at source number 18. Okay, source number 18 is Ocher Midrashim. Now, Ocher Midrashim does mention the story of Yehudis. I once read the Ocher Midrashim. It's not clear if every medrash they have is really authentic. Okay, however, this comes from Megillas Antiochus, which is authentic. And at certain communities, there was a custom to read Megillas Antiochus. And this is how they tell the story. All right? And in verse Lamadalid, he says, Begam Isha Ashir Yolda Ben Achrei Mos Baila. There was a son, a girl woman who gave birth to a son after her husband died. So what happened? There was a gzeira against the bris milah, Vatamol Osul Shmonas Yomim. And what happened was she circumcised him on the 8th day. Okay? Now, we know that Jewish women have always been moser nefesh to circumcise their boys. There's a story, I think in the Shoah, a tragic story, about a certain lady had a baby in her arm, and she came to ask the Nazi officer for his gun, or his bayonet, a knife. And everyone thought she wanted to kill herself. And so Jews around, why are you doing it? Don't do that. And the Nazi officer says, no, why are you bothering her? Here. And I guess he gave her a knife that she had, and all of a sudden she takes the bundle, and the bundle is a baby, and he says bracha bris milah and gives the baby a bris. And then she says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you gave me a baby, okay, I'm giving you back the baby with a bris. And then she was killed and her son was killed. So, always Mesiras Nefesh, right? So what happened for bris milah? So what happened? Batan vatomer vatal al-chomesh Yerushalayim. She circumcised her son, and then she went up to the wall of Yerushalayim. Ubna hamo biyada, with her circumcised son in her hands. Vatan vatomer lech omrim bagras harasha. She said, go tell Bagras, he was the one in charge then. You want to stop the bris that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made of us? He says, he says, the bris of our forefathers will never cease. And he says, and these three mitzvos will never leave our descendants. And what happens? Vatafil banala aretz. And at that point, the story says, she basically dropped her baby down off the wall, and she herself, tibul acharav emusa shem ke'echad. All right? He says, "V'rabim ibnei Yisrael hayu asher osu kem yom mehem v'lo shanu bris avosam." And many Jews did like that. And the question I have is, obviously I wasn't there, but okay, she wants to do bris milah, and she'll get killed. Okay. Maybe she's mechuyev to do that. But why did she go on the wall of Yerushalayim and throw herself down? And I think that what happened here, and what happened in the same story with the daughter of the Chashmonaim that we saw, it wasn't that they cut off you. It wasn't that they just wanted to kill themselves. It wasn't that they just wanted to do a mitzvah. They wanted to inspire the Jewish people to fight back. As we know in the days of Chashmonaim, there were certain Jews who felt, what can we do? We can't fight. We might as well be killed. And we tried hard to be the Am Nivchar, the chosen nation. So these ladies got up in the wall, and they did it that way because they wanted to inspire. They wanted to push the people of Yerushalayim, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael, to fight. And as we were sitting here and hearing the story, what a horrible story it is, and it happened like over 2,400 years ago maybe. Can you imagine what the Jews thought at their time? They said, if they're going to do that, we have to go fight. As we saw that the daughter of the Chashmonaim did the same thing. She dressed up in rags, giving out wine, and she started giving musar. She said, this is not right. So I think that it's possible to suggest that when we talk about the miracle of Yehudis, it wasn't the miracle of the Yehudis cut off the head, because we don't really know when that happened. But the miracle of Yehudis, and as Rashi says, it wasn't Yehudis. It was a nace happened through a certain lady. The miracle was that these ladies, the Jewish ladies, inspired their husbands and other men to fight back, not to take what the Greeks are doing, sitting down, not to allow them to destroy the Jewish nation. That was the inspiration. And it's fascinating because, as I said before, one of the questions was, how do we compare the miracle? How do we compare the miracle of Hanukkah and Purim, where a miracle happened through a lady, to the miracle of Pesach, where the ladies weren't really involved in the miracle itself? So what was the miracle? I mentioned the Gemara Masechah Sota. How did the miracle happen for them? So it says because when the commentary now, when the Jewish people were depressed, the men, it was so depressing. Who can continue? Who has hope? Who can try to make the situation better? The ladies went out to the field, and they found fish, and they found water, and they gave their husbands to eat, and they washed their husbands, and they had intimacy. And the point was to show that we can't give up, we have to continue. And that's the b'schar. The reason why the Jews were redeemed from Mitzrayim wasn't because they had fish to eat, because the women inspired them not to give up, to live a normal life, to fight. That was the inspiration. And the truth of the matter is, I was thinking about it, so that fits in very well. Yehudis, and that's why the Morok Ksiya, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, I asked, so because some story happened 200 years before, we're going to tie it to Hanukkah? Why tie it to Hanukkah? Especially if it happened at the time of the Babylonian exile. But the story of Yehudis, which is mentioned in the Svarim Chitzonim, one of those books, which is not incorporated into the Tanakh, says, that story tells us the power of the Jewish lady to go ahead and inspire Jewish men to fight, not to give up. And that's what Hanukkah is about, because the women had a very strong hand, as we see from Megillas Antiochus, as we saw from the Shiltis, in inspiring the men to fight. And therefore that story of Yehudis which maybe happened 340 years before, it's the same idea. Because, so therefore when it says, Niglu al Yadam, it doesn't mean they caused the miracle. What it means is, and it doesn't mean they were the main miracle. Because, Afhain, as Tosas asked, they also caused the miracle. What does it mean? Yes, maybe the men caused the miracle of the war. But who pushed the men? Who inspired the men? That was the ladies, not to give up. Not to give up. And the Gemara Masechah Sota tells us the same thing. Who inspired the ladies? Who inspired the ladies was the men in Mitzrayim. Who inspired the men? The men were ladies. Wait a second. There's one thing, and then it says, and now, how about Esther? Esther was part of the main miracle. So I was thinking about, there's no question about that. However, if you look at source number, it's not numbered, but it's right after source number 17. It's Gemara Daf Tesvav Mabet in Maseches Megillah. Gemara says, we know the whole story of Esther. What did Esther do? Esther invited Haman to the party. Gemara asked, very strange. Why would Esther go ahead and invite Haman to the party? Why? Why? So Gemara gives many reasons. She wanted to trap him. Rabbi Yeshua says, he says, you have your enemy, try to be nice to your enemy. Rabbi Meir says, because she didn't want to give Haman a chance to find a way to escape. Rabbi Yehuda says, so people shouldn't recognize that she's a Jew and kill her first. He says, and then Rabbi Nehemiah says, something that always resonated within me. Strange. She says, the last thing she wanted was for the Jews to go ahead and say, we have a friend in the palace. There's nothing to worry about anymore. What it says is, Kedei shelo yomer Yisrael, achos yesh lanu abayis hamelech, and not to ask for rachamim, not to ask for help to fight. It says, she wanted the Jews for those few days to realize they still need help, not to think they're going to lie on Esther. So Esther, with everything else she did, it was very important to her to inspire the Jews. That's why Esther was the one who pushed Megillas Esther for Purim. Because that was also part, it's true, Esther had a very big hand in this. But part of what Esther wanted to do was to inspire the Jews. She says, Yotzumo, fast for me, daven for me. She wanted the Jews to do tshuva. She pushed them. And therefore the miracle of the ladies was the fact that they caused the nace. They caused the nace. Yes?
What about the connection to Pesach? What about the Mialtas of Rios?
Yeah, the Mialdas, there's no question. In other words, Mialdas of Rios, you're right, but the Gemara, there's no question. They want to have them done, but the Mialdas of Rios, they did not, that's not what the Gemara mentions the miracle. The Gemara mentions the miracle is because of what the women did in the fields being with their husbands. That's what the Gemara mentions. Now, I'm sure there were many miracles, yeah.
Doesn't this have great implications for political things?
I don't want to talk political right now, okay? It
means you cannot rely on the friends in court.
For sure, I agree, yes.
When we were dancing around the fact that she was forced to sleep with him on that first night, is that one of the things you have to
Who was?
The women. How things have to
Look, I'll tell you, we don't necessarily know exactly what happened. I didn't look over the book of Judith either. But in other words, there are different versions of the story of what really happened. According to the version in the Shiltis, right? They didn't sleep. She got him good, dead, and drunk first. Okay. And we know, by the way, the story of Yehudis is very similar to the story of Yael and Sisera. Yes.
Right. This might be a stupid question. Simple.
No questions are. Yeah.
I don't understand the question whatsoever. If the purpose of the Ivanim was to Hashmatar Sechel, of course they were bros on this. They had their chalik of the Klein.
No, that's the second opinion. But we're talking for the Rishonim will hold that they caused the nace. That's the second. We didn't get there yet. I hope they get there. Okay, we're focusing on Rishonim who said they caused the nace. That was there were other opinions. You're right, but I was talking about the Shita of the Rashbam until now. Okay. So you're right. That's the second opinion of Tosas. Hopefully I'll get to it. But I was just focusing on other opinion. All right. So now the question comes up, and it says, so why is it that the man likes for the lady? Okay, you have different minhagim. So in order to answer that, I want to go through the second opinion you mentioned. If you go back to source number 3, Tosfos says, what does it mean? It means that they were also included in the decree. As you say, if you look at source number 3, it says, he says, they were also in danger of being destroyed. All right? So therefore, anyone who's in danger of being destroyed had to go ahead and keep that mitzvah, and therefore they were in danger Pesach time, Purim time, and of course Hanukkah time. Hanukkah time also. Now, so Tosfos asked the question, so that's the case, what makes these 3 mitzvot so special? There are many mitzvot that were done because of Gulas Mitzrayim. For example, he says, Tosfos gives the example, Sukkos. Why do we sit in the sukkah? Because we have to remember we came out of Mitzrayim. What did God do? He sat us where? In Sukkot. Why do we wear tefillin? Leman Tiskor, to remember they left Mitzrayim. So Tosfos says that the idea of Av Hein Hayvos Hanes only applies to rabbinic mitzvahs. Mitzvahs to rabbanim. Mitzvahs that are rabbinic. However, so he says, and therefore, these 3 mitzvot are the rabbanon, and that's why they're obligated. This is not a rule that applies to Torah-oriented mitzvahs. That's what Tosfos says. My grandfather, and you can see in the back, it doesn't have a number. It was a cut and paste, and this is mentioned in. It's brought down in one of the Mesorah magazines, also in other Sfarim. Forgot which. I think it's one of the first editions, and he gives a different question. He gives an answer. He says like this. He says there are 2 types of mitzvahs because of a miracle. One mitzvah is a mitzvah where you have to go ahead and do because of the miracle. And one mitzvah is a mitzvah which you do for Pirsum Hanes. Okay? Which means to mefarsem, to talk about the nes, to spread the nes. So he says, so therefore these 3 mitzvahs, Megillah, 4 cups of wine, the mitzvah of Hanukkah, that's different. That's not just to remember the miracle. That's what Pirsum Hanes. And therefore, because it's for Pirsum Hanes to go ahead and to spread the miracle, so what we have to do is that a lady is obligated in. But a mitzvah was just to remember the nes, the miracle. So he says, that is not obligated upon ladies. Okay? That's what he says. Even though, and it's fascinating because when it comes to sukkah, the mitzvah sukkah is when you sit in the sukkah. So when I'm wearing tefillin, I don't have to remember Mitzrayim. I should, but I'm still kind of mitzvah. When I sit in the sukkah, if you look at source number 7 and 8, I'm supposed to remember that we were in the sukkah when we left Mitzrayim. Okay, he says, so I'm supposed to do this. That I'm supposed to remember what God did when we left Mitzrayim. The difference when we left Mitzrayim. So he says, and that's why a sukkah has to be less than 20 amos high. So is a concept of remembering the miracle. What makes Pirsum Hanes so different, so special? That it's different than other mitzvot, and because it's different, a lady is chayaves also. So I want to read to you, obviously, not word for word, from my uncle's sefer, Rav Yashabir Soloveitchik, on essays in Purim and Hanukkah. And he says, the Rambam points out that, before you go ahead and you light the Hanukkah candles, we make a bracha. And then we say Haneres Halalu. Okay? And you should know that actually, according to one girsa, when you make the bracha Shasanisim, the Haneres Halalu is in that bracha. So he says, lighting Hanukkah candles require explanation and interpretation. He says, the reason for the miracle is we have to publicize and give expression to the miracle of Hanukkah. He says, so therefore, when we light the Hanukkah candles, we have to express what happened. And he says, the Hanukkah candles, as you know, is a dialogue and a monologue. Okay? It's a dialogue because we have to express it to others. But it's also a monologue because even though every year we light, but every year, as I said at the beginning of this year, we discover something new. When you light the candles each year, one deepens and widens his knowledge, discovering new aspects of Hanukkah. And he says that every year what you're doing is you're re-experiencing and reliving the miracle. When you say Haneres Halalu, you're re-experiencing the miracle. And he points out, he says, and this is something which is borrowed from Pesach night, because Pesach night, it's obvious, everyone knows, we have to go ahead and Pesach night we have to go ahead and we have to experience like leaving Mitzrayim, and that's Pirs Manes. It's not just to talk about the miracle, but we have to talk about it in a way where we're experiencing it. And that's what has to happen in Purim when you hear the story of the Megillah, and that's what has to happen in Hanukkah time. Also, when you light the candles. So he says, so therefore, if you're going to have a Pirs Manes, we just don't remember the miracle, we're re-experiencing it, it's very important that the ladies are involved also. Why? Because we see from all three miracles, Pesach, Hanukkah, and Purim, how the ladies, they created the spirit, they created the feeling, they pushed us, and therefore it's so important today for us to realize that the ladies are involved, because without the help of our wives or our mothers, it's very difficult to re-experience what happened. And that's why Ishto Kegufo, because when I light that menorah, I have to realize that if I don't have my wife, doing it for my wife, it's going to be much more difficult to re-experience. I have to tell you, I didn't have a chance to bring it in. My mother, Zechron Levracha, right before she passed away, weeks before, she was honored by my father's yeshiva. How did it happen? Because she was diagnosed with a sickness, and the doctors at that time thought it was chronic. Chronic, 5 years, 6 years, and the yeshiva wanted to honor her. And but everyone, I guess, didn't realize it was very, very serious. And it turned out that a week after the dinner, she had to be taken to the hospital. She was hospitalized, and soon after, she passed away. But she didn't have the strength to speak. She wrote up a speech, and she gave it to my brother to say. And I still have this speech. I look at it as my mother's last charge to her children, at least. And one of the things she said that I remember, my father and the Rav always used to blow what's called brisker tekiyas. Special shitas brisk, how to blow tekiyas. And she said she loved hearing brisker tekiyas. Why? Because she saw that as a connection to what happened in brisk, in Balazhin. And she spoke about it as a child. She read about Balazhin, and then she got connected to the Soloveitchik family afterwards. She was somehow or another, she taught us how to experience what happened, years ago and in the future. I remember as a child learning with her Navi. And it was unbelievable, because when you learn Navi with her, you learn Sefer Shoftim, you re-experienced it. Shmuel, I re-experienced it with her. Because she had the touch of a mother, of teaching us how to go and re-experience. I remember, I never realized, when we were eating, sometimes she would tell me, this is the kind of breakfast we had in Eretz Yisrael. She was in Eretz Yisrael before the state, when it was still called Palestine. Or this is the kind of meal we used to have in Ritva. She never liked pizza, because they never served pizza in Eretz Yisrael or Ritva back in those days. Okay, but you say, but you say, to re-experience, and just like by the Nes of Hanukkah, by the Nes of Purim, by the Nes of Pesach, they were able to create that feeling of hope, the feeling that you have to stand up and not allow the enemies to destroy us. Today they can also create that great experience. And for that reason, we say Ishto Kegufo. Why Ishto Kegufo? Because she pushes her husband to really experience. It doesn't mean, by the way, that a lady can't light her own menorah. My uncle held you should, based on the Rambam. However, even if she lights her own menorah, she is there to help him re-experience. And as I said at the beginning of the Shiur, we always learn something new, and every year my uncle said you can re-experience in a different way. And that's why the lady has such an important part of the miracle of Hanukkah. And I just want to finish off by saying that it's this miracle, learning from Yehudis, that what the power of the lady is so important, because the ladies have to understand what they can accomplish, what they can do, and through doing this, how close they can come. I'll just finish off. There's a Sfas Emes, which I saw a few weeks ago, just looking on the Parsha, and the Parsha is Vayera. So that it says in Parsha Vayera that Avram Binu, we know, had the bris milah, and then the Parsha Lechacha, Vayera lav Hashem be'ein Elohim Mamre. Hashem appeared to Avram in the tents of plains of Mamre, and Chazal ask, what was going on in the plains of Mamre, and why does the Torah tell us it was in the plains of Mamre? So there's a medrash, very strange medrash, which probably need time to understand. It says that when Avram Avinu was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do bris milah, he went to ask his friends. Who were his friends? His friends were Honor, Eshkol, and Mamre. And should I do bris milah? Very hard to understand. And Honor and Eshkol told him, don't do bris milah. And Mamre said to him, no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, do bris milah, you do bris milah. You don't ask any questions. And the Sfasem, and because of that, out of reward, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to him in Mamre's plains and Mamre's property. And the Sfasem asks a very simple question. Why should Mamre get a reward? What did he do? What did he do to deserve? What did he do to deserve this reward? Didn't cost him any pain. Avram had to go through bris milah. And the Sfas says something fascinating. Why is it that Honor and Eshkol didn't want Avram to do bris milah? Whatever that means. See, Honor and Eshkol, they were friends of Avram. Close friends. And because Avram was so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Avram was such a Baal Midah, such a Baal Chesed, he was so special, they benefited greatly from that relationship. And they wanted to maintain that relationship. But they were afraid that if Avram Avinu does bris milah, this Sfas Emes says, that relationship would change because now Avram Avinu is different than them. And Mamre said, I hear it. But the bottom line is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, do bris milah. Nothing to think about. It'll all work out. And what happened? Did bris milah, and because he did bris milah, Mamre had the great schus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to Avram on his property. He benefited from the bris milah. That we have to understand what our tafkid is and what our role is. Everybody has to understand, and from that we can benefit greatly. And I'll just finish off that if we think about what Hanukkah is about, Hanukkah, which I mentioned, is a holiday where it wasn't like Purim necessarily. In other words, if you read the history of Hanukkah, it wasn't like, the Jews beat the Greeks, they went to the Beis HaMikdash, great miracle of menorah, and all of a sudden everything was over. It wasn't that way. It was pretty difficult. As a matter of fact, you look, they didn't have control of Yerushalayim even. They had control of the Beis HaMikdash. And by the time it was over, all four of Matisyahu's sons died. The only one who survived was Shimon. And even then, it was only maybe during the time, maybe a little bit later, that they had real security. So why are we celebrating Hanukkah? Because Hanukkah, as we saw, what Yehudis did, what Esther was able to do in a certain way, and what happened in Mitzrayim, was the idea of not giving up. And that's Hanukkah, that we can't give up. We can't give up. And that's why Hanukkah is one of those holidays that we keep it even after the destruction of the temple. Because Hanukkah is the time we have to realize that the time of darkness, and we light up the darkness by lighting a Hanukkah menorah. And it's the message that every Jew has to incorporate, the message of Yehudis, the message of the women in Mitzrayim, and even the message of Esther in some way, that we can't give up. We have to keep fighting, standing for what's ours. And in that way, we can go ahead and we can bring the redemption. And just to finish up with what idea that was mentioned, and therefore, just like Esther didn't want the Jews to rely on what's going on in the palace, we also have to be very careful not to give up and not to rely on what's going on in the palace. We have to, for ourselves, we have to think independently, and we have to realize what can we do to make the situation better. And even when sometimes things seem very, very dark, Hanukkah tells us the message of Yehudis, which maybe happened 400 years before. And that message is, never give up, keep trying, and then you can inspire everyone else to fight with you. And Mitzvah Hashem, one day, we will see the end of all our troubles. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I look forward to it. But thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I was there. You have a video of it? No, I love it. He spoke about when a child likes a menorah, right? Oh, no. sometimes. See, Munkasher didn't like about the fact that